Hey everybody. So I'm just gonna answer some of the questions that are on our discussion. And it says, imagine that you are a new client coming to your Practicum agency. Where would the engagement process begin for you, and what would that process feel like? So, for somebody who's interested in coming into the mental health office, it would look like initially you would go up to the secretary, and then they would have you fill out some basic information and get some information from you, and then they would probably try to schedule you with like a person based on what need you're having at the time. So like if you're looking for rehabilitation services or community services, they would try to schedule you with one of them, or if you're looking for counseling, they try to have you schedule you with one of those people. And so that's kind of how that would start. And so I feel like with that engagement process, it's really important for the secretary to be like friendly, nice, and like have a calming presence, especially for people who walk in who are like in crisis or like are panicked or stressed or just even uncertain about getting services, because some people are uncertain about starting these kinds of things. So, the agency gathers demographic information with just basic information initially with the walk-ins. And then they do meet with like the specific service that they're looking for, and that person then does their own intake process and goal setting with them during that first session. Like asks what's going on and like why are you here, kind of do a get to know you, and then before proceeding into the strength-based goal setting perspective. Um, so we meet many of our initial sites visits that are identified within the semester. If I'm shadowing intakes or completing assessments, I have completed assessments before, even in my job before I did my role at the center. And so I feel like I'm pretty comfortable doing assessments and trying to create that comfortability and building that rapport. And so I feel like that's pretty extensive. It can be a pretty extensive process, and it usually takes the whole hour. And what's unfortunate about it is just because the way our paperwork has to work for the state, it seems like a very chop, 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 very structured, here's what you need to do to get this initial stuff going kind of thing. And so it's really important, I think, for the intake and assessment process that initially happens to create that humanization, person first centered services, even though it is leaning more towards a medical model and not so much of a recovery overall model. And so that can be kind of challenging, especially if somebody comes in who's in crisis and they just need to get in with services as soon as possible. I feel like we don't deal with that as much with people who are in crisis coming in, because usually the crisis has happened, which has spurred the walk-in. But sometimes that does occasionally happen, and you just need to make sure that you are having that sensitivity and really trying to relate to their experiences and support and validate as much as possible. And so that's kind of how I would say the intake process looks like at the agency that I'm with right now. And so, yeah, that just kind of sums up my thoughts and the discussion on that. So, thanks, guys.